Have you ever wondered, what happens when an ordinary man, a poor black single father, opens his door to strangers in the middle of a storm? What if that single act of kindness unlocked a future he never dreamed possible? This is not just a story about survival. It is a story about choices, about compassion when it would have been easier to look away, and about how one night can change a life forever. Welcome to today's tale, crafted in the style of Undercover Boss, Undercover CEO, and Celebrity Undercover Stories. A story filled with emotion, suspense, and a twist that will leave you questioning what you would do if the storm came to your door. Stay until the very end, because the moment that seems ordinary is the moment that changes everything. To the single parents listening right now, I want to tell you something before this story begins. You are not failing. You are in the middle of a fight. You are strong, and your child is lucky to have you. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Sometimes the bills on the kitchen table scream louder than any words of comfort. But hear me, your story isn't over. Now, let's step into the world of one man who thought his story had ended. His name was Darius Cole, 33 years old, a single father, and a man who carried the weight of more regret than most people twice his age. On that night, the storm was merciless. Rain lashed against the cracked windows of his run-down apartment on the outskirts of Atlanta. Thunder rolled across the sky with the force of artillery fire. And inside, Darius sat motionless at his kitchen table, staring at a single sheet of paper. An overdue electricity bill, marked with a red stamp that read, "Final Notice." The microwave clock glowed 11:58 p.m., the hour when even the loneliest streets go quiet. But the silence in Darius's home was already unbearable. It had been this way for months, ever since his little girl, Lyric, had moved away with her mother after the divorce. He tried to call her twice a week. Sometimes she picked up. Sometimes she didn't. And when she did, 5 minutes of crackly connection was never enough. As another flash of lightning split the sky, the power flickered. The apartment groaned like an old man ready to collapse. Darius rubbed his tired eyes, wondering how much longer he could keep surviving like this. That's when it happened. Ding dong. The doorbell? The sound cut through the storm like a blade. Sharp, unexpected, unwelcome. His heart jolted. Who in their right mind would be at his door at this hour, in this kind of weather? No neighbor ever came by, and in this part of town, unannounced visitors after dark usually meant trouble. Cautiously, Darius rose from his chair. Each step to the door felt heavier than the last. He pressed his eye to the peephole. At first he saw nothing but rain. Then 2 shapes came into focus. 2 figures standing close together, shivering, drenched from head to toe. They weren't menacing. They weren't shouting or banging. They were just waiting. 2 young women, barely 20, their braided hair plastered to their faces, their arms wrapped around each other like lifelines. Darius felt his stomach tighten. He had seen a lot in his 33 years. Too many scams, too many setups. His neighborhood taught him that trust was expensive and usually fatal to those who gave it away too freely. And yet, something about these 2 was different. It wasn't the way they looked. It was their eyes. Wide, terrified, pleading in silence. Eyes that reminded him of Lyric whenever she woke up from a nightmare, whispering, "Daddy, don't leave." Darius kept the chain lock on as he cracked the door. Rain splashed across the threshold, soaking his bare feet. His voice came out rougher than he intended. What do you want? The taller one looked up. Her lips trembled, but her voice was steady. Please, we're sorry to bother you. Our car broke down a mile back. We've been walking for hours in this storm. No one else opened the door. Her sister nodded quickly. The phone lines are down. We have nowhere else to go, just... Please, sir, let us call for help. Darius studied them in the dim porch light. They were strangers, out of place in every way. Their coats were expensive. Their boots clearly cost more than his month's rent. They didn't belong here. Every instinct screamed, shut the door, lock it, protect yourself. But another voice, quieter and older, whispered in his chest. What if it was Lyric? What if she was stranded on a dark street, cold and afraid, and every door stayed closed? For a long moment, Darius stood frozen. His hand gripped the doorframe so tightly his knuckles whitened. The storm howled behind them. The girls shook in the freezing rain. And his heart, it pounded like a drum, caught between fear and compassion. Finally, he made his choice. He slid the chain free, opened the door wider, and felt the storm's fury whip into his home. Come inside, he said quietly. Get out of this weather before it kills you. The relief that washed over their faces nearly broke him. They stepped into his small, broken home, whispering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And as he shut the door behind them, Darius had no idea that opening it would change his life forever. The storm followed them inside. Not with rain, but with silence. A heavy silence that clung to the walls of Darius's apartment, pressing against the peeling wallpaper and the flickering light bulb in the ceiling. The girls stood in the doorway, dripping water onto the faded linoleum. For a moment, none of them spoke. Darius felt embarrassed, almost ashamed, as their eyes scanned the tiny living room. His apartment was more than shelter. It was a museum of struggle. A sagging couch rescued from the curb. A coffee table with scratches that told the story of years gone wrong. A heater in the corner that coughed like an old man every time it tried to push warmth into the room. Darius cleared his throat. It's not much, but it's dry. He disappeared down the narrow hallway, returning with 2 towels, edges frayed, color long faded from too many washes. The taller twin took hers gently, almost like it was a gift she didn't deserve. Thank you, she whispered. Her voice trembled, but not just from the cold. They began drying themselves, and that's when Darius noticed the details that didn't fit. Their coats were designer. Their boots, hand-stitched leather, the kind you only saw on people who shopped in parts of Atlanta he couldn't afford to walk through. Even soaked, even shivering, they carried an aura of wealth. What were girls like this doing here? Darius thought, not just in his neighborhood, but in his home. Still, he forced a smile. I'm Darius. And you are? The taller one answered. I'm Zara. This is my sister, Layla. Her voice was polished, with the faint trace of an accent that hinted at an upbringing far from the cracked streets outside. Darius nodded slowly. Well, Zara and Layla, you picked the right door. Everyone else probably thought you were trouble? Can't say I blame them. Layla looked down, twisting the towel nervously in her hands. We just needed help. We didn't mean to scare anyone. Something in the way she said it made Darius soften. He gestured towards the sofa. Sit. You're safe here. As they sank onto the worn cushions, Darius shuffled into the kitchen. He filled the kettle with what little water was left in the jug, dropped in the last 2 peppermint tea bags he'd been saving, and brought them steaming mugs. The heat fogged their glasses, and for the first time, they exhaled deeply, their shoulders sinking with relief. Zara glanced around the room, her eyes landing on a small picture frame on the shelf. Inside was a photograph of a little girl with wide brown eyes and a missing front tooth. "Is she yours?" she asked softly. Darius swallowed hard before answering. "Yeah, that's Lyric, my daughter. She's 7 now." His voice cracked on the word 7. "Where is she?" Layla asked gently. "With her mom." Across the country, he paused, then added, "I don't get to see her much. Just summers, if I can afford the flight." The twins exchanged a look. Not pity, but something closer to respect. Darius leaned back, staring at his calloused hands. "I used to be somebody," he said quietly. "An engineer. I designed buildings. Had my own firm for a while." Zara tilted her head. "That sounds important." He gave a humorless laugh. "It was. Until it wasn't. Divorce. Business collapsed. Lost the house. Lost almost everything." He let the words hang in the air. The storm outside rumbled, as if echoing the collapse of his past life. After a long pause, he added, "But I'll never stop being her dad. Even if the world strips everything else away." Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy with truth. The kind of truth that could only be spoken when strangers were too new to judge and too kind to interrupt. Layla held her mug tightly, her voice quiet but certain. "Your daughter is lucky. She has a father who still fights for her." The words struck Darius harder than any storm. No one had told him that in years. Not his ex-wife, not his old colleagues, not even himself. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. Not as a failure, not as a man with overdue bills, but as a father still standing, even if barely. He nodded slowly, staring at the twins across the table. He didn't know who they were, or why fate had dropped them on his doorstep. But he knew one thing. This night was changing something inside him. And maybe, just maybe, it was changing something inside them too. The storm outside didn't let up. But in Darius's apartment, something unexpected began to take root. Conversation. Soft, careful. Honest. The twins sat cross-legged on the worn couch, steam from their mugs fogging the air. Darius leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, as though bracing himself for every word. Zara spoke first. "You said you used to design buildings. What kind?" Her question caught him off guard. Most people never asked. Most people didn't care. He cleared his throat. "Commercial projects, mostly. Offices, retail centers, nothing glamorous. But it was mine. I built it from the ground up for a moment." His eyes lit with a memory of pride. But the light dimmed quickly. "And then I lost it." Everything collapsed. The firm, my marriage, my family. Layla's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "What happened with your wife?" Darius hesitated. The question cut deep. He rarely spoke about Renee, the woman who once wore his ring and carried his dreams beside her heart. "Finally," he said, "she told me I was married to my work, that I was building skyscrapers but not building memories." She wasn't wrong. The words felt jagged in his throat. "I thought I was doing it for them, for her, for Lyric. But in the end, I wasn't there. Missed birthdays, missed bedtime stories. I thought money would buy security. Instead, it bought distance." The room grew still. Only the wind rattling the window pane filled the silence. Zara leaned forward, her expression soft. "You're still here, though." "Still fighting for your daughter." Darius let out a bitter laugh. "Fighting? Some days it feels like I'm crawling. Last month I couldn't even afford the plane ticket to see her. I had to listen to my little girl describe losing her first tooth over a 5-minute phone call." Do you know how that feels? His voice cracked on the last word. He turned away, ashamed of the tears burning his eyes. Layla set her mug down gently. It feels like you're missing the world, she said. Her tone wasn't pitying. It was knowing. Those words pierced him. Yes, that was exactly it. Missing the world, missing Lyric's world. The twins didn't rush to fill the silence. They let it breathe. And in that breathing space, Darius felt something he hadn't in years. Safe enough to keep talking. I don't want her to think I gave up, he whispered. Even if I can't be there every day, I need her to know. Her dad never stopped trying. His hands shook as he gripped the counter. The storm rumbled overhead, a mirror of the storm inside his chest. Zara's eyes glistened, though she blinked quickly as if to hide it. You know what stands out to me? You didn't quit. Life took almost everything from you, but you didn't quit being her father. That's strength. The word echoed in his mind, foreign yet familiar. No one had called him strong in years, not since the divorce, not since the collapse. For a moment he let himself believe it. Still, something about the twins unsettled him. They were too composed, too poised for girls their age. Their words carried the weight of experience, like they had lived far beyond 20 years. And whenever he asked about their family, their eyes flickered with hesitation before drifting elsewhere. He didn't press. Everyone had secrets. And tonight, they had given him something priceless. Listening ears. As the hours crept toward dawn, the storm showed no sign of relenting. But inside that small apartment, an unexpected warmth lingered. Not from the rattling heater, not from the weak cups of peppermint tea, but from connection. From strangers who had, in one night, seen each other more clearly than most friends did in years. When Darius finally leaned back in his chair, exhaustion heavy on his shoulders, he realized something. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely alone. When dawn finally came, the storm had passed. The world outside seemed washed clean, as if the night before had been erased by the rising sun. But inside Darius's apartment, the echoes of the storm still lingered in damp towels, in empty mugs, and in the strange bond formed between strangers. Darius woke earlier than usual, habit pulling him from sleep before the alarm. The first thing he noticed was the silence. No thunder, no rain, just a fragile quiet, broken only by the sound of soft voices coming from the living room. He padded down the hallway, barefoot, and found the twins sitting at the kitchen table. Zara was whispering to Layla, her hands moving as though she were making a case, while Layla shook her head. The moment they saw Darius, they fell silent, their eyes darting to each other in a way that made him pause. "Morning," he said, trying to sound casual. "How'd you sleep?" Layla smiled, faint but genuine. "Better than we have in weeks." Her answer carried more weight than it should have. Darius poured coffee into mismatched mugs, apologizing. "Only got the cheap stuff. No cream, just sugar." The twins accepted without hesitation, holding the chipped cups like they were fine china. As they sipped, Darius studied them in the clear light of day. Everything about them stood out in stark contrast to his world. Their hair neatly braided despite the storm. Their posture straight, almost regal, even in borrowed hoodies. And those boots real Italian leather, gleaming now that they were dry. These girls did not belong in his neighborhood. Not in a place where cars sat on blocks, and grocery stores had more bars on their windows than food on their shelves. "Where exactly did your car break down?" Darius asked carefully. "About a mile north," Zara said. "By the warehouses." Darius frowned. That's not a great area to be walking at night. He hesitated before adding, and not exactly the kind of place people your age shop for property. Zara and Layla exchanged another glance. It was quick, almost imperceptible. But Darius caught it. Still, he didn't press. They were his guests, not his suspects. After breakfast toast from the last of his bread and a splash of juice he'd been saving for Lyric. The three of them walked together to where the car had been left. Darius wasn't prepared for what he saw. There it sat, a sleek, black Tesla Model X, shining under the morning sun. Even parked in the grimy lot beside abandoned warehouses, it radiated status and wealth. Darius whistled under his breath. That's not exactly the kind of ride I expected. Zara's lips curved into a sheepish smile. It belongs to our family. We borrowed it. He crouched, popped the hood, and after a few minutes of examining the engine, pointed to the problem. Your belt snapped. Won't be driving anywhere until it's replaced. You'll need a tow. They nodded, making the call to roadside assistance. As they waited, the conversation grew sparse. The warmth of the night before seemed replaced with hesitation, like both sides carried questions they weren't ready to ask. When the tow truck finally arrived, Layla reached into her purse. She pulled out a small, elegant card with raised lettering and pressed it into Darius's hand. If you ever need anything, she said softly. Anything at all, call this number. Darius looked down at the card. The design was clean, professional, embossed in a way that screamed wealth. He didn't recognize the name printed on it, Adeyemi Global Developments, but he knew instinctively it wasn't the sort of card handed out lightly. He tucked it into his pocket, nodding. Thanks, but really, I just did what anyone should have. Zara shook her head. No, you did what no one else would. The words hit him harder than expected. He remembered the storm, the knocks on other doors. 17 houses on that block. 17 people who had chosen silence. And somehow he had been the one to answer. As the tow truck pulled away with the Tesla and with Zara and Layla sitting inside, the familiar weight of loneliness returned. The apartment would be quiet again. The bills would still be waiting on the table. Lyric would still be hundreds of miles away. But something felt different. He couldn't explain it. All he knew was that the night had left a mark, like a spark he hadn't felt in years. He touched the card in his pocket and thought, they're not ordinary girls. And this isn't the end of it. 2 weeks passed, 2 long weeks that dragged across Darius's calendar like heavy chains. Life didn't change overnight. The storm had ended, but the weight of bills, the silence of the apartment, and the ache of missing Lyric returned with full force. He landed a small drafting project for a neighborhood shop, just enough to pay part of the electricity, and maybe keep food in the fridge. But the spark from that strange night still lingered. Every now and then, Darius would pull the card from his dresser drawer. He would trace the embossed letters with his thumb, Adeyemi Global Developments, before setting it back down. It looked too important for him, too far from his world. So he never called. Then, on a Tuesday morning that felt like any other, the doorbell rang again. Not the storm this time, not desperation pounding at his doorstep, just a clean, sharp chime at 10:30 a.m. Darius thought it was a package, maybe another bill. He opened the door casually, and froze. Standing there was a man unlike anyone Darius had ever seen up close. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that looked cut by hand. His presence filled the doorway before a word was spoken. And beside him, Zara and Layla. Mr. Cole, the man said warmly, extending his hand. My name is Malik Adeyemi. I believe you've already met my daughters. For a second, Darius couldn't breathe. Daughters. Everything snapped into place. The expensive coats, the hesitation, the elegance in their voices. He gripped the doorframe for balance, whispering, "You're their father." Malik nodded, his smile calm, steady, and somehow overwhelming. "And I understand I owe you a debt of gratitude I can never repay." Darius blinked, lost for words. The twins stepped forward, eyes already glistening. "We told him everything, Darius," Zara said softly. "How you were the only one who opened the door that night. How you gave us shelter, food, and even your story when you had so little yourself. 17 houses stayed shut. Yours didn't." The weight of those words pressed down on him. He almost hadn't answered the bell that night. He had been 1 second away from pretending he hadn't heard it. Now here stood the father of the twins, a man who radiated influence and wealth. Malik's voice grew serious. "My daughters insisted I wait before meeting you. They wanted to be sure. So we looked into you, Mr. Cole. Your past, your career, your struggles, your fight to remain a father to Lyric." A flush of shame burned Darius's skin. They knew. They knew everything. His failures, his unpaid bills, the court custody battle he could barely afford. I don't understand," Darius stammered. "Why would you look into me?" Layla stepped closer, her tone gentle. "Because we wanted to help you, the way you helped us." Malik held out a folder, his eyes steady. "Mr. Cole, I am the CEO of Adeyemi Global Developments. We are expanding. We need men of skill and character. And from what I've seen of your architectural work and what I've heard of your heart, you are both." Darius shook his head, dazed. This can't be real. You can't just offer me a job because I let your daughters sleep on my couch." Malik chuckled, his smile widening. "That's not why. I don't reward people for kindness. I trust people who prove it. My company doesn't just build skyscrapers, we build communities. And we need people who understand that buildings are more than concrete and steel. They are the bones of a dream." He placed the folder in Darius's trembling hands. "I am offering you a position as Senior Design Engineer with Adeyemi Global. The salary will be enough for you to relocate closer to your daughter, enough to give you a life you thought was gone." The words felt impossible. Darius opened the folder, seeing numbers he hadn't imagined in years. A job, a future, a chance. Tears blurred his vision. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Malik's voice softened. "Because when the storm came, you chose compassion. You opened your door to strangers. You showed my daughters what character looks like. And now, I want you to help me build something greater than any storm could destroy." Darius stood frozen in the doorway, folder clutched against his chest. It felt heavy, not because of the papers inside, but because of what it represented. A new life, a second chance, something he never thought he'd be offered again. Tears welled in his eyes, but this time they weren't born from despair. They came from relief, from hope, from the thought of finally looking his daughter in the eyes and saying, "Daddy's coming back." Zara stepped forward, her voice soft. "We never forgot that night, Darius. We never forgot how safe you made us feel in the middle of a storm." Layla's voice followed, steady and kind. "You gave us warmth when you barely had enough for yourself. That kind of love, it doesn't disappear, it changes people." For a moment, Darius couldn't speak. He had been called many things in life: failure, burden, liability, but never protector, never miracle. Malik placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "My daughters could have called me that night, but they didn't. They wanted to see who would open the door. And you did." You reminded them and me that true character reveals itself in the darkest hour. Darius let out a shaky laugh through his tears. You have no idea how close I was to ignoring that bell. But you didn't, Malik replied firmly, and that choice has changed everything. 6 months later, the world looked very different. The apartment was gone, along with the constant threat of overdue bills. In its place stood a new chapter and office in downtown Houston, with a skyline view that stretched for miles. Darius sat at a wide drafting table, sketching plans for a community center designed to serve families who had almost nothing, just like he once did. Outside his window, the future rose in steel and glass. But this time, the buildings weren't just projects. They were promises. Spaces meant for children to play, for parents to gather, for hope to find a home. And in the evenings, when his work was done, Darius didn't return to an empty apartment. He drove across town to a small house where Lyric now lived with him half the week. Together they cooked simple dinners. She showed him her drawings, her school projects, her missing teeth. Every laugh, every hug, every whispered "Good night, Daddy" was proof that life had given him back more than it had taken. On Sundays, he sometimes joined the Adeyemi family for dinner. Long tables filled with food, laughter echoing through a home alive with warmth. Zara and Layla always greeted him with hugs, as though he were part of something bigger now. And Malik often raised a glass, toasting not success, not wealth, but gratitude. Looking back, Darius knew the miracle hadn't been the job offer. It hadn't been the paycheck, the new office, or even the second chance at custody. The real miracle was a choice. A single choice on a stormy night to answer the door, to open it, to see strangers not as a threat, but as people in need. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the spark that sets an entire future ablaze. Sometimes the miracle you're waiting for is already knocking. And now, as you hear this story, let me leave you with a thought. This tale is fiction. Every name, every company, every place you heard is created for storytelling. But the feelings, the choices, the meaning, those are real. So let me ask you, do you believe something like this could happen in our world? Do you believe one act of kindness, one open door, could ripple outward and change lives? Or does it only belong in stories? Share your thoughts. Because sometimes the conversations we start about fiction are the first steps toward building the world we wish was real. And so, from a tiny apartment on the edge of the city to an office where dreams are built in steel and glass, one man's decision to open the door changed not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. That is the power of compassion. That is the ripple effect of kindness. And yet, here's the haunting question. 17 doors stayed shut, only one opened. What does that say about us? Would we have answered the knock? Or would we have turned away, pretending not to hear? Stories like this remind us, life's greatest miracles often hide behind simple acts of courage. When you give, even in your darkest hour, you invite grace to find you. But remember, this is fiction. Every character, every company, every event here was created for storytelling. And yet, doesn't it feel like it could be real? Tell us in the comments. Do you believe this could happen in our world? Or is it something that belongs only in stories? Because sometimes, discussing fiction is how we learn what kind of future we want to build.